Hello, my name is Sensei Alex Kakuyo. I am a teacher in the Bright Dawn Center of Oneness Buddhism. I'm also the author of the Buddhist blog, The Same Old Zen. Thank you for joining me today for this week's Q&A. Each week, I answer questions that have been submitted to me online from members of our Sangha about Buddhist practice and how it can be integrated into daily life. So if you'd like to ask me a question and have it included in our Q&A, there are two ways to do that. One, you can post on this video and I'll answer your question next week. Or if it's a question of a personal nature, or if you'd like to remain anonymous, you can email me at sameoldzen@gmail.com. Again, that's sameoldzen@gmail.com, in which case I won't read your question verbatim or your name out of respect for your privacy, but I will answer it as part of this video. So let's get started. Our first question comes from Alize Holloman, and she asks, do you think that Buddhism can be practiced authentically in the West? Do you think Buddhism can be practiced authentically while living a layperson's life? And these are both very, very good questions, and my answer to both of them is yes. I think Buddhism can be practiced authentically. And I say that because if we look at the definition of authentic as given by the dictionary, I'll read it. It says of undisputed origin, genuine. Now, there are many Buddhisms in the world, which is to be expected. Chinese Buddhism differs from Japanese Buddhism, which differs from Indian Buddhism, which differs from American Buddhism. And again, that's to be expected. We don't go into the forest expecting all of the trees to be the same. We shouldn't practice Buddhism expecting that everyone will practice it the same way. But there is an origin, there is an essence, if you will, that is a part of all the different Buddhisms of the world. That's the 3 marks of existence, the 4 noble truths, and the Eightfold Path. These are the core of Buddhist teachings. And all the other Buddhist teachings and sutras that have come in the last 2,600 years come from these core things. That's the authentic Buddhism, if you will. So I would say any Buddhist practice that has those things at its core is authentic Buddhism. So the 3 marks of existence, non-self, impermanence, and suffering. The 4 noble truths, life is suffering, suffering is caused by desire. The way to end suffering is to end desire, and the way to end desire is the Eightfold Path. And then, of course, the Eightfold Path, which is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. If we have those items at the core of our Buddhist practice, then we are practicing authentically. And then, of course, we just need to practice hard and practice consistently. And to your second question, can we practice authentically as a layperson? Absolutely, because we can learn about those things through a layperson's life, through our daily life. A good example would be an experience I just had, where I wanted to answer these questions live using Facebook Live, and it was an absolute disaster. The audio was garbled, the picture was very fuzzy, so I ended up having to do a YouTube video instead. And that's fantastic because it reminds me of the first noble truth, which states life is suffering, or things don't always go the way we plan. There's my Buddhist lesson for the day, and I learned it based on software not working the way I wanted it to. So as lay people, if we look at our daily life in that way, not as just something we experience, but as something we can learn from, then we can absolutely practice authentic Buddhism as part of a layperson's life. Bright Dawn, which is the Buddhist order that authorized me to teach, and Reverend Kakuyo, who is the spiritual leader of Bright Dawn, that's his entire model, is how do we blend Buddhist practice with everyday life, with a layperson's life? How do we make washing dishes, going to the restroom, dealing with videos, part of authentic Buddhist practice? And to explain to you exactly how far this goes, he actually teaches us something called toilet gasho, which is, chanting we do prayers we do every morning when we get up to use the restroom. So there you have it. Every part of a layperson's life can be part of an authentic Buddhist practice, including using the toilet. Dogen, who was a Zen monk and the founder of Soto Zen, did the same thing. And in Shobogenzo, he gives very precise instructions not only on how to use the restroom, but also how to cook rice. And he spent many pages telling people the proper way to prepare and cook food so that it can be part of Buddhist practice. So there's no separation between Buddhism and a layperson's life. They are one and the same. Our next question comes from Joseph Chitty. He asks, how do your Pure Lands and Zen practices complement each other? Are they separate or innately tied? And what can one practice bring to the other that is not inherently there already? Well, I'll start with the second question. Are they separate or innately tied? And I'd say they're 100% tied together. Because when we talk about Nimbutsu, which is the chanting of the Buddha's name and meditation on the quality of the Buddha, so either chanting Namo Amitabha Buddha if we're in China, or chanting Namo Amida Butsu if we're in Japan, that's a form of meditation. Just like Zazen is a form, or Zen is a form of meditation. They're one and the same, different practices, but the idea of single-pointed concentration is the same, the difference being that we're concentrating on different things. So they are innately tied together 100%. And I would say they complement each other primarily because chanting Nimbutsu puts me in a good mind state for meditation. I find that when I chant first before practicing seated meditation and I focus on the qualities of the Buddha, then that helps to calm my mind and puts me in a space where I let go of whatever's been happening that day. And it's kind of a reminder that, okay, now we're practicing, now we're meditating. So when I practice seated meditation after chanting Nimbutsu, which is a part of Pure Land Zen Buddhism, what ends up happening is I drop into meditation more quickly, and my meditation is much deeper than it normally would be. So they complement each other beautifully in that way. And what does one bring to the other that's not inherently there already? I wouldn't say that there's anything that's inherently missing from Pure Land Buddhism or from Zen Buddhism. I think they're largely one and the same in terms of the goal of the practice. However, how they help each other is that when we're trapped in the mind of illusion, we think they're separate. That is, we see the chanting of Nimbutsu, which is more of a compassion practice, to be separate from the practice of seated meditation, which is more of an absolute practice. So when we chant Nimbutsu and we practice Zen, when we practice seated meditation and we chant Nimbutsu, it reminds us that they integrate with one another. The conventional feeds into the absolute feeds into the conventional. So it's a reminder of this truth, and it helps us remember that. So that's how they complement each other. Our next question comes from Stuart Dord, and similar question, how can the practice of Nimbutsu complement Zazen? So it's similar, but I'll give a slightly different answer in that many times when I'm dealing with suffering, sometimes it's hard to carry it on my own, to be frank. Sometimes I'm dealing with so much sadness or grief or anger that I just need a short respite. I need a break. And when I chant Nimbutsu, when I chant the Buddha's name, when I meditate on his qualities, I give my suffering to him for a short time. And I'm reminded that I'm not in this alone, that I'm backed by him, and I'm also backed by my Buddhist Sangha, which goes back 2,600 years. And when we think about the Buddha's bowl, what's really beautiful is that bowl is infinite. So it can hold all of our suffering when we need it to. And he'll take it anytime we want. We just need to chant. Nembutsu, Namo Amitabha Buddha. And when we do that, we get a short break. And of course, when we're done chanting, he gives us our suffering back so we can learn from it. But it helps because, again, it gives that short respite, it gives that short break. It reminds me, at least, that I'm not in this alone, that there are other people walking the path as well. And that's probably the biggest help that I get from chanting the Buddha's name and engaging in these Pure Land practices. Let's see. Our next question comes from Daniel Sharpenberg, who is a Buddhist priest in the Suyun Chan Buddhist order. And he asks, what is your least favorite thing about Buddhism as it's practiced today in the West? That's a big question. And I'll start by saying that Buddhism in the West is quite young. So we're going through some growing pains, which is to be understood and appreciated. Buddhism has only been in the United States for about 100 years, and it's only grown and come into the mainstream, so to speak, in the last 30 years or so, where Westerners like myself were practicing. Before that, it was largely practiced by Asian immigrants. So it's only been here for a relatively short time, and we're experiencing some growing pains, but I think we're heading in the right direction. That being said, one thing I think we struggle with, however, is our obsession with the absolute. So going back to the Eightfold Path, we have the wisdom teachings, we have the morality teachings, and then we have the meditative teachings, right? So right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. And I think we're so focused on those that we forget the other tenets, which are equally important. If they weren't important, Buddha wouldn't have taught them, right? So this flawed idea that if we meditate every day, we don't need to practice the precepts or worry about them. Well, that's not true. Right action, which is a part of the Buddhist precepts, is important, and we need to engage in that as we engage in the absolute practices, the meditative practices as well. Or if we see suffering like homelessness or things of that nature, oftentimes we in the West tend to immediately go into the absolute and, well, everything is perfect. And yes, that's true, everything is perfect, but that doesn't mean that we don't help someone who's struggling, whether that's with homelessness or with the death of a family member. If someone needs a hug, we give them a hug. I don't think it's proper Buddhist teaching to say, well, accept your suffering. That's a correct teaching. It's in terms of the absolute, but we can give that teaching and also give the person a hug. We can do both. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes in Western Buddhism. So I think that this obsession we have with the absolute to the point where we almost ignore the conventional teachings of Buddhism in terms of the precepts and right action and things of that nature, I think can be dangerous. So that's one place I won't say I dislike it, but I think that's one place where we can improve as Western Buddhists. So our last question is anonymous. And again, if you want your question to be anonymous, you can email it to me at sameoldzen@gmail.com, and then I won't read your name or your question. I'll just give the basic gist and then give you an answer. And this anonymous person asks, how do we cope with anger in ourselves and others? Which is a great question, and I think it's something we all struggle with. I think the first thing we can do is practice acceptance. I find that 100% of the time when I'm struggling with anger, either anger that I'm experiencing or anger directed at me from another person, it's coming from a lack of acceptance. In other words, I want the world to be one way and it's a different way, and I'm angry as a result. So what I also often ask myself is, what do I want the world to be doing right now? What am I not getting? And then how do I learn to practice acceptance towards what I am getting? So if I'm at Starbucks, let's say, and the line is really long and I'm angry about it because I have somewhere to be and I'm running late, well, I recognize that anger, practice right mindfulness, and then from there, I practice acceptance. So either, waiting in line is a natural part of, getting coffee from a restaurant. So this is just something I have to do. Or I can't get my coffee today because I'm running late and I just have to accept that, leave, and I'll get coffee another time. So this is important, acceptance. And also acceptance of other people as well. If they're angry at us, a lot of times we'll get angry at their anger, right? Because I don't deserve this anger. And maybe you don't. But, it's being directed towards you. So what do we do about it? Well, one, we accept that they're angry and they're allowed to do that. We don't control them. And once we practice acceptance towards their anger, the next step is, again, finding a skillful way to deal with that anger. And one thing I like to do is give people compliments. So if someone calls me a dirty name, for example, I'll respond by giving them a compliment. So if they call me a stupid so-and-so, well, then I'll say I like their shirt, which is great because I find that it de-escalates the situation, right? So maybe they'll be a little bit confused that I'm complimenting them, but they won't be more angry, right? And that also helps to alleviate any angry feelings that I'm feeling myself. So going back to the teachings of compassion and action and also loving kindness, which are two of the four sublime abodes that Buddha wants us to cultivate in our minds. If people are angry at you, give them a compliment. See what happens. I think you'll be happy with the result. And finally, I think it's helpful to remember that life is an illusion. Going back to the teachings of the Absolute, a lot of times we get so drawn into what's happening that we forget that none of this is real. It's all changing. So if I don't get my coffee when I want my coffee, is it a problem in the conventional sense? Yes, but in the absolute sense, in the big picture, it's not a big deal if I don't get my coffee right now. Or if we see something on Facebook that we don't like, Facebook, it's useful and it's fun, but it's not real. It's just words on a screen. And if we remind ourselves that it's an illusion, then, the troll we're dealing with or the website that we're looking at that we don't like, well, it doesn't bother us so much because we reminded that it's an illusion we're looking at, and we have a choice whether we want to engage with that illusion or not, whether that's simply responding to the troll by giving a compliment or simply clicking off of that website that's upsetting us. So those are, I think, the two best ways to respond to anger in ourselves or others, is either by practicing acceptance or reminding ourselves that life is an illusion. And that's our last question for this evening. So thank you for joining me. Again, if you would like to ask a question and have it answered as part of the Q&A, you can post it as on this video, or you can email me at sameoldzen@gmail.com. And of course, feel free to check out my blog if you'd like to see other articles that I've written about Buddhist practice and how we can integrate it in daily life. My blog can be found at sameoldzen@gmail.com. So, Amitabha, and as we say at Bright Dawn, until next time.